official podcast of the Jacksonville Public Library.
I'm Hurley.
And I'm Jenna.
Today we're talking about our favorite new releases of the year. We're talking the hottest books of the year. Right, Jenna?
Yes, that is right. So these are our favorite books that came out in 2018 that we just happened to read.
Yep. And that we just happen to love.
Indeed.
Most of them.
Yes, most of them. Hurley read a lot more books than me.
I don't know. It's like my hobby. You know, you do all kinds of things. You do CrossFit. You have a cat. Like, you're a busy lady. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I go to bed at like 7 o'clock and read from hours before then to lull myself to sleep. So really, you're the one with the life, Jenna.
I'll take it. Fine. Just kidding. All right, so I read 8 books that came out this year. And so Hurley and I are going to talk about some of the books that we love, but also we have 10 library staff members on the episode today that are going to give you their favorites from the year.
That's right. We wanted you to hear from some of our library staff because they're reading incredible books too. And I'm sure you would love to hear some of their recommendations since they're book people.
Exactly.
Bookworms.
They're the experts.
Expert bookworms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You want to go first?
Sure. So this year was, for me, the year of nonfiction. Like, so much good nonfiction came out this year. And I'm usually more of a fiction kind of gal, but I just couldn't stop reading all the new memoirs and personal essay collections that were coming out this year, particularly the ones by famous people.
I love those too.
Like First Lady Michelle Obama.
What?
Which I'm cheating a little bit with my first one because I actually haven't finished reading it yet.
I was going to say, that just came out.
I know, it just came out, and it's also like a tome. It's 425 pages, which go Michelle, but also, oh my gosh, like so much to read, but also really worth it. Mm-hmm. And it's really emotional. I've learned a ton that I didn't know about Michelle and Barack's relationship before I read the book. Like, for instance, this is juicy. Are you ready?
Yeah. Juicy
bits of the Obamas. So Michelle was Barack's supervisor at a law firm, and that's how they met.
Scandalous.
I know. And so they met in Chicago when Michelle was a lawyer. She hated being a lawyer, and she ended up quitting, which is like super inspiring because I think when people, especially women, kind of go through the motions to like become the career they've always dreamed of being, and when in her case going to Harvard Law School,
right, and
then they just get there and decide like, oh, I don't know, I don't really like this, and then they're courageous enough to turn their backs and do something they love more. Like, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And so I was like really inspired reading that because that's like a narrative I don't think we hear enough. I cried my eyes out when Michelle described what it was like to lose her bestie to cancer and her dad to MS in the same year. She was 26 years old. She lost her best friend and her dad in the same year. And I think, that's such an immense tragedy. And I think really that's part of what makes her the strong woman that we all know and love today. The book is beautifully written, and I'm not quite done, but I can already tell that Michelle has put so much time and energy and love into writing this book in order to make it the best memoir it can be, and that like really, really shows in every page and every chapter. It's well worth the read, and really well worth the wait you're about to undergo in the holds line if you're putting it on hold at the library. We have a lot of copies. I think we have over 70 copies in our collection, but if you want to get in on Michelle Obama's book, you got to put it on hold because it's building up. Yeah.
It is pretty intense. And that is also number 1 on the New York Times bestsellers list this week, which is really exciting.
And I bet it's going to stay there for months. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
because it's a really beautiful book.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Okay, well, my favorite book of 2018 is a young adult novel, nonetheless.
You're a big young adult fan, right?
Yes, I really do. I love the little feel-good stories, you know. This one's a thriller, air quotes thriller, for young adult, which is interesting. I haven't read one like this before, but I really liked it. I'm going to have to go find read-alikes for this. But anyways, it's called The Cheerleaders by Cara Thomas. And it is about a town in Sunnybrook where there aren't cheerleaders anymore at the high school because within a month, 5 die. So 2 of cheerleaders are killed in a car accident, and then 2 are murdered in one of their home by their neighbor, supposedly, and then 1 commits suicide.
Wow.
So they disband the cheerleading squad, and It's 5 years later is when the book starts, after 5 years after the death, and the school and the staff, want to commemorate and remember the cheerleaders who passed. And then it's kind of told from the perspective of Monica, who is the sister of the cheerleader who committed suicide. And she kind of wants answers because through the investigation, nothing linked all of the murders. But she feels like something didn't get investigated correctly. So she kind of finds an unlikely friend, and they go back and dig through and try to discover what really happened.
Interesting. So without giving away too much, do they find a link between these different deaths?
They're sort of, not in the way you would think, though. The girl that Monica, the main character, teams up with to kind of do the research and investigation, there is a link to her in a way, which is interesting. And then I guess there is a link to the suicide with the murders. So, yeah, there's not a direct link. It's kind of interesting how they did it, because you would think, oh, we'll find out that they were all connected. But kind of in their own way, they're connected.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's hard to say without giving away what happens.
True. So what kind of readers would you recommend this book to?
I think that anyone who really enjoys young adult fiction would like it. Anyone that likes a good, kind of more lighthearted mystery would enjoy it as well.
This book also has really beautiful cover art too, right? It's such a striking book. It's like an Instagrammable book. If that's your thing, like if you want to show off that you're reading, which we love, and please tag us when you do that at Jack's Library, but show off this book because it's super cute.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. And I read this on my Kindle, actually. Fun fact, you can get Kindle books from the library.
You sure can.
Yeah, that was the shortest wait time because it was pretty popular. But yeah, I loved that book. It was great.
I'm going to have to read that one over the holiday, I think. Yeah. Sounds like really good feel-good holiday reading.
I know.
About 5 cheerleaders who die. So the next book that I really loved was, of course, David Sedaris' latest collection of personal essays called Calypso. And one of our library staff, Susan, who you'll hear from in a little bit, she chose this book to recommend too because it's so funny, but also really sad. I'm a really big David Sedaris fan. I have been for a long time. And he's like, when I first read him when I was a teenager, he's the writer who made me think like, oh, I think I want to be a writer someday.
Yeah.
Like he's a really meaningful writer to me. And I think this collection is my new favorite of his, like hands down, because like I said, it's like really funny and also really, really sad. He talks about what it's like to deal with his aging father, and he speaks about that so beautifully, and also just makes his dad sound like the most like lovingly annoying person on the face of the planet.
Yeah.
But he also talks about what it was like when his sister died of suicide a few years ago, and also how he was in her life at that point when it happened, and they had a pretty tumultuous relationship, and I don't know, it was hard to read about, and I can imagine that it was hard to write about too. But somehow amid all of these really dark topics, the essays are still really funny somehow.
Right. That's what I was wondering. I was like, I feel like he's usually known for being a more satirical, funny writer, but having all of these like deep, dark kind of topics that's interesting.
Yeah, he balances it really well and is able to find the humor in the darkness, which is such a valuable skill as a writer, and he does it perfectly. He's the master of that, I think. My favorite part of this book is when David talks about a beach house that he and his partner Hugh recently purchased on the coast of North Carolina. And here's what kills me. They named the house the C section. SEA, the SEA section, which it's the best name ever. It's
really good.
I hope I can be half as clever someday.
That was great.
Yeah.
I love that. So my favorite nonfiction book that I read this year is called So Close to Being the Blank Y'all Don't Even Know by Retta, who is the Parks and Rec star, as you all know, Donna Meagle.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Also coined the treat yourself.
Of course.
It's phrase that everyone knows and loves. And she talks about how that came about and like how they should have copyrighted it or something because it's everywhere now. But yeah, that started on Parks and Rec with her and what's her?
Aziz Ansari.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Tom, so good.
Treat yourself.
I love it. But Retta is really, really funny. And she talks about how she abandoned med school after graduating from Duke University to pursue her dream of being an actress and comedy. And I thought that, that's
I didn't know that.
Another one of those kind of inspiring Michelle Obama stories.
Right.
How she, her family was like really pushed hard to get her to go to Duke and, to get the funding and money to pay for college, and then how she got into med school and started and worked in a lab and was a chemist and stuff. And totally abandoned it to move to LA and become an actress. And how she got her start in Parks and Rec and all that, and her love of purses, which is a really funny bit about how much she loves purses and what she's willing to spend on them even when she wasn't making a lot of money. But I listened to the audiobook on this one, which is really great because it's read by Retta herself.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
Yeah, it's definitely, if you're going to read this book, you have to get the audiobook. I got it on overdrive from the library, and it was really worth it for sure.
Yeah, there's nothing like hearing an author read their own story, especially when that author is also an actor and a really funny person in general.
Yeah, those are my favorite, like all the Mindy Kaling books. And
Tina Fey's. Did you read
Amy
Bossy
Poehler.
Pants? Yeah.
I listened to all of those on audiobook.
That's the best.
It's great.
David Sedaris does that too. He reads his own audiobooks, and he got his start in radio, so he has one of the best voices of all time. Yeah. Another book, also nonfiction, that I loved but also filled me with a lot of rage because the topics in it are just so, I don't know, anger-inducing. It's called The View from Flyover Country, Dispatches from the Forgotten America, and it's a collection of essays on a variety of topics, and they're all written by a journalist named Sarah Kendzior. The book opened my eyes to a lot of issues that issues that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, especially this year, but she made me think about them in different ways, like things like income inequality, especially as income inequality relates to things like the necessity of internships in this day and age, which is definitely a modern concept. And we treat internships like it's a fact of life. Like for many careers, you have to have an internship before you get the job, but and an unpaid internship at that most of the time. But it hasn't always been this way, and not everyone can afford to take on full-time unpaid work. They just can't get away with it because they can't afford it. And there's a huge class disparity there that was really hard to read about, but it's an important statement to be made. And I think she makes that statement just the right way in her essays. I'm also kind of a reader that I really like books. I don't know, I'm kind of a masochist when it comes to reading, but I like books that occasionally fill me with rage and open my eyes to the cruelty of the world. And if you're like that and you really like sort of a thought-provoking collection of essays, this book is definitely for you. It made me very angry.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and let you hear some of our staff picks for 2018. Hurley and I will be back with a few more suggestions in a minute.
My name is Tomi Adeyemi, and I work in adult programming at the Jacksonville Public Library downtown. And the book that I selected is called The Faithful Spy by John Hendricks. It is a true story, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the plot to kill Hitler. And so John Hendricks not only wrote it, but he illustrated this book, and it's actually on NPR's Top 100 Books of 2018. And he didn't know that, so when it was on Instagram, he posted it. I was like, oh, that's awesome. I need to do this book. And so The Faithful Spy is all about this guy, a true story about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He was a theologian who came to America, was really impacted by churches in Harlem, and then it's all about him going back to Germany and becoming a spy to try to assassinate Hitler. I won't give you all the details, but we know Hitler dies. And that's about it.
Hello, I'm Allison McCarty, and I'm the Acquisitions Librarian in the Library Support Services Department. I've read a lot of amazing books this year, but I want to make a particular recommendation for the audiobook listeners out there, and that's Sadie by Courtney Summers. Sadie is the dual story of a 19-year-old woman called Sadie, who is on the hunt for her sister's killer, and of a podcast called The Girls that is covering Sadie's mysterious disappearance after her sister's murder. In one storyline, Sadie follows a winding trail leading from town to town and hopefully to her quarry. In the other, podcast host West McCrae talks with Sadie's friends and family and sometimes ends up on that same trail with Sadie, but months behind. I absolutely loved the voice actors for Sadie and West, and I found the back and forth storyline engaging and frustrating in the best way. I like the way the author played with the truth of Sadie's story and how Sadie and West each interpreted the events differently, but never entirely correctly or incorrectly. I would highly recommend this book for fans of true crime, podcasts like Serial, TV shows like Veronica Mars, and full cast audiobooks.
Hi, my name's Allison Mason. I work in Youth Services Administration at the Main Library. One of my favorite books from this year is Educated, a memoir by Tara Westover, which is about the author's upbringing in a survivalist family in rural Idaho and her eventual path to getting a PhD at Cambridge. One thing I really enjoyed about this book is that for the first half of it, it's almost like reading a dystopian novel. Because Westover was stuck in this crazy, hard-scrabble, off-the-grid existence, with her family always preparing for like this nefarious government takeover and the end times, and there was no school for them and no doctors to go to. And that really makes the second half of the book all the more compelling, because Westover is able to navigate her way out of this dystopian existence and into mainstream society and academia. Of course, this isn't a fictional novel, it's all real life, so some parts of it are pretty harrowing and heartbreaking, like her family's refusal to seek medical attention despite having severe injuries, and also details of physical abuse that Westover endured. But the story is just so moving, both because of what Westover survived and how much she's accomplished, that it makes this book a really engaging read.
Hello, my name is Matthew Taylor, one of the librarians here at Maine. I have been enjoying Searching for Stars on an Island in Maine by Alan Lightman. I really like the way he blends appreciation of science with a unique spirituality, and I'm really looking forward to reading his other book, Einstein's Dreams.
Hi, I'm Marcia, a library associate at Maine Fiction. The 2018 book I read and really liked was The Winter Soldier by Daniel Mason. This is about World War I Eastern Europe. Lucius is a 22-year-old medical student in Vienna. The training consists of a lecture hall. When war breaks out, inexperienced students are sent to field hospitals on the front. The book opens with him taking a train to find someone waiting for him with a horse. The other person starts to leave, and Lucius's horse can't move because its urine has frozen to the ground. This book brings up post-traumatic stress disorder before it was ever a diagnosis. It strongly reminds me of the Russian book Dr. Zhivago.
All of those books you just heard about from our library staff are, of course, available on our shelves, and we'll have all of those linked on our podcast blog, jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast. Now, Jenna, let's continue talking about our favorite books of the year.
I would love to.
What do you have next?
Okay, so in the theme of actress, actor, comedian books, here's another one that I listened to on audiobook that I actually requested to purchase because I knew the book had come out and we had it on our shelf and I saw it downstairs in browsing.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh, this would be really great to listen on audiobook. And I checked on Overdrive and we didn't own it.
Ah.
And so I hit suggest to purchase. And a couple weeks later, I got an email saying, we bought your book or your audiobook.
That's amazing.
Isn't
In
that
case
great?
you guys don't know, you can always suggest purchases to us. If we don't have something in our collection that you want to read, we want to know about it. And I feel like whenever I tell people like, oh, I work for the library, they're like, oh, I love the library, but they never have anything I want to read. I'm like, well, get on it and tell us what you want to read.
Yeah, that's why we're here. We're here to give you books. So tell us what you want to read.
Exactly.
Works the same way on Overdrive for audiobooks and ebooks. So anyways, I finally got this audiobook and it was great. So it's Stay Hungry by Sebastian Maniscalco. who is a Italian comedian. You've never heard of him, right?
I have not.
He's
No.
really funny. He has a couple Netflix specials, I think, and he mostly talks about like his dad growing up and just being like in this typical like Italian family. But his motions and like on stage and stuff, it's just hilarious. So the book is not as like, it kind of, you know, goes through his life and his struggle of becoming a stand-up comedian. So it's not as like punchline funny as I would have expected maybe from a comedian book. But it talks about him being a waiter in LA, working small gigs for like almost 20 years before he made it like big as a comedian, which is just another story of like relentless, you know, like persistence and fulfilling your dream. So it was really inspiring in that way. And he tells his whole stories about his wife and meeting his wife when he was like, you know, 33 or like later in life. And just they had this crazy Italian wedding in Italy for like a week. And, you know, he just has like really amazing stories of his wife. It's really sweet.
Aw.
Yeah, but it was great. And he's also going to be in Jacksonville at the Times Union Center December 30th. And I think we just checked, producer Brian checked for us, and there are tickets still available. So if you like Sebastian Maniscalco, check out his book from the library, listen to it on audiobook, and then go see him at the Times Union Center.
Do it, people.
Pretty sweet. Well, trifecta.
Love it. The next book I loved is another collection of essays. It was the year of the essay. It was. This is a debut collection by an author named Chelsea Hodson, and it's called Tonight I'm Someone Else. Another very Instagrammable book, if I may say so myself. The cover is like this beautiful purple portrait. It's stunning. The collection, I think, really puts the personal in personal essays because we get really, really up close to Hodson's life in the essays. Sometimes a little uncomfortably close, but who doesn't love being uncomfortable occasionally? I do. The author, Chelsea Hodson, worked with the performance artist Marina Abramovich. Are you familiar with her work at all? So she's pretty well known for a performance installation called The Artist is Present that she did in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. And it was a very confrontational installment where she sat in the museum and she had her eyes closed and a stranger would come up and sit in front of her. And then she'd open her eyes and they'd just stare into each other's eyes until the person got up and left. So it was this interesting like mutual gaze kind of experiment that she did for a few months at the MoMA. So Hodson writes about the collaborative work that she did with Marina Abramovich in the book. It was really interesting to read about that because performance art can be so abstract and tough to understand. So having someone from the inside kind of explain what was going on was really interesting. And Chelsea Hodson's really young too. She's in her 30s. So I feel like she brought a more contemporary voice to that topic. My favorite essay in the collection was not about performance art, though. It was about the concept of longing. It was called The End of Longing. And it gives a lot of really interesting images and a really snappy, quick sentence succession. I want to give you a few examples of the sentences she has. So here are a few. This is from The End of Longing. Old letters are not proof of love, but they are proof that we were aimed at, even reached for. I love that. What's the point of longing? To continue.
Wow.
Man, interesting stuff. Here, this one's my favorite. All this technology and no app to quell the disappointment of getting what you want.
Like mobile app?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
So I think anyone, this is a weird suggestion because it's not bookish, but I think anyone who likes Lana Del Rey would really like Chelsea Hodson's writing because it strikes a really similar dark and kind of glamorous tone as Lana's music. So if you're a Lana fan, read Chelsea Hodson's Tonight I'm Someone Else.
Nice.
Yes.
Read alike, listen alike.
Listen alike, read alike, same thing.
That's great. Here's my book that I'm excited about that came out in 2018,
Ooh.
but I haven't finished reading yet.
Okay, I mean, just like me and Michelle, go for it.
Right, and I'm actually like not even that far in to even give a real recommendation, but I'm just want to say that I'm excited about it. The Children of Blood and Bone.
Oh yeah,
by
you just
Tomi
started that.
Adeyemi. Yes, this is actually, Hurley and I did a video. You guys, we'll talk about it again at the end, but we did a video of our top checked out titles of 2018. So this book, Children of Blood and Bone, was the #1 young adult novel that was checked out the most in 2018.
And it's huge, too.
It's like, yeah, over 400 pages.
Over 500 pages.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, you're in for a treat.
There's no way I'm going to finish it within my 2-week checkout time. Pressure is on.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Tomi Adeyemi is like a really young writer, 24. This book was already contracted for a movie before it even came out. And it's a trilogy. So I got to read it before the next one comes out in 2019.
Yeah.
I also need to check if that date is out.
Ooh, yeah.
Yay.
As soon as that goes up on our website, put it on hold, because it's gonna go fast.
That's
I'm talking
true.
to Jenna, but I'm also talking to you too, listener.
Yeah.
Put it on hold.
Put it on hold fast.
I don't know what the title is yet. I don't know if they've announced that.
Yeah, I don't know if they've announced it yet, but super excited about that book. It's I've been told it's really Black Panther-esque, very magical, kind of like African village tribe people and the magical powers that they have. It's an allegory of
I think of the Black Experience.
Yeah, Black
I
Experience.
read. I haven't read it yet, but I'm excited to.
But I can already get that within the first couple chapters. It's gonna be good. I'm super excited.
Cool.
Yeah.
So this is a little out of character for me, but I'm going to recommend a graphic novel.
Oh,
which
nice.
I never read graphic novels.
Me
I'm not a
neither.
graphic novel person, but I read one this year. It's not like a superhero graphic novel. It's kind of different, but it's called Coyote Dog Girl.
Love it.
It's by a graphic novelist and illustrator named Lisa Hannawalt, and it's definitely the most delightful book I read this year. Like, it was just so cheery and beautiful, and like made me cry, but made me laugh. It was gorgeous. I loved it. It's a graphic novel that's for adults about a girl who's part dog and part coyote. Her name's Coyote Dog Girl. She lives out in the wilderness, and she's trying to outrun bad guys on her horse. So it's like a modern Western kind of story. And when her horse gets stolen, she has to find a way to get it back. The author, Lisa Hannawalt, is a producer of the Netflix show BoJack Horseman.
Okay.
So if anyone's a fan of that show, they'll love this book because the humor is pretty spot on with BoJack Horseman, and the art is very similar too. And the art is kind of like BoJack Horseman. It's a little like rudimentary, which is what I love about it. That's what makes it so charming. And Coyote Dog Girl is a great character. It's also a really quick read, so I would definitely recommend that for, the reluctant readers in the crowd. It's also the perfect graphic novel for people who don't really like graphic novels ordinarily.
Yeah. It's a good,
Like
a good
myself.
gateway graphic novel.
Yeah, definitely.
Are there any others in a series with that?
It's not a series.
Okay,
No, it's a
just
one-off, but
Cool.
it's from the publisher Drawn and Quarterly.
Okay.
And they have a lot of like really popular graphic novelists that aren't like superhero graphic novelists in their collective, I guess you could say.
Right. And we have a huge graphic novel collection at the library. And actually, I think, 2 of the top 5 young adult top checked out were graphic novels,
That's right.
which surprised me, but I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that is awesome. All right, so we're going to let our staff close you out with the last of our books, and then Hurley and I will have a few last words.
Hi, my name's Sean. I'm the branch manager of the Brown East Side branch of the Jacksonville Public Library. My favorite book this year was My Morning Routine: How Successful People Start Every Day Inspired by Benjamin Spall. It's actually a collection of interviews with successful people from all walks of life and all careers, collected from their website over decades. And it was enlightening to me to see that there are constants with successful people and then there are exceptions. And it inspired me to live my life in a different way. I don't know, I haven't encountered anything that reads like it. Maybe websites like Lifehacker, or if you're into do-it-yourself books by like Tidying Up by Marie Kondo. Happy reading.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm the Early Childhood Specialist for the Youth Services Department of the Jacksonville Public Library. A book I read and thoroughly enjoyed this year was David Sedaris' Calypso. I read a lot of David Sedaris books because I do like essays. I have a fairly busy life, and I feel like essays, I can read a chapter, it's complete, and I feel like I've accomplished something at the end of it. So when I saw David Sedaris had a new book, very excited. But I will even say, of all the ones I've read, Calypso is exceptional. While it addresses a lot of heavy topics, like his difficulties with aging, living with OCD, the suicide of his sister, and concerns for an elderly parent that I don't necessarily have connections to personally in my life, I feel like he tackles these subjects with humor and insight and warmth, and he had me laughing out loud on one page and then grabbing a tissue in the next. But ultimately, I felt very deeply satisfied and relieved to have somebody like David Sedaris in this world. Another book, a read-alike, that I was excited to see was also released this year is called Look Alive Out There by Sloane Crosley. She's also an essayist like David Sedaris. She writes about her life and experiences with both humor and insight. So Look Alive Out There was released this year. I'm currently listening to it on audiobook and thoroughly enjoying it, and I wish you happy reading.
My name is Aisha, and I'm a library clerk at the Charles Webb West Connect Library. My favorite book of 2018 is by Ellen Fournier, and it's called Rock Steady, Brilliant Advice for My Bipolar Life. And what I like about this book is that one doesn't have to have bipolar disorder in order to relate to her struggles with her emotions. And it's in the graphic format, which makes the information visual. And that's definitely a plus for people who retain information better that way. The book is actually pretty comedic in how she presents the information, and she kind of pokes fun at herself. Even though the situations are serious, shows us ways that she's learned how to cope. And that's something that I've learned from this book, is how to navigate the mental health world and some coping skills for people with mood disorders. So I would definitely recommend this book. Anybody can learn from it.
Well, my name is Nancy, and I am a library clerk at the main branch. The book I read was Guess Who, and the author is Chris McGeorge. My synopsis about the book is that it opened with a horrifying beginning, very clear on whodunit kind of plot. The book that reminds me mostly is The Caretaker, because of the many characters and their creepy identities, by Thomas Simpson. And what I like mostly about the book is that it was not a tell-all book. You would have to read the book completely to find out what happened. You could say that it was very suspenseful.
I'm Lisa Buggs. I am in charge of adult programming for the Jacksonville Public Library, and I'm housed at the main library downtown. My favorite book of 2018 was Barracoon, the story of the last black cargo by Zora Neale Hurston. Barracoon is a counter-narrative that invites us to break our collective silence about slaves and slavery, about slaveholders and the American dream. Completed in 1931, the narrative of Oluwale Kosala, also known as Cujo in this book, has finally found its audience, and Zora Neale Hurston's first book-length work has found a taker and is now finally published. Though nearly a century has passed between the completion of the final draft of her manuscript and the publication of Barracoon, the questions it raises about slavery and freedom, greed and glory, personal sovereignty, and our common humanity are as important today as they were during Kosala's lifetime. It is an amazing read, and it gives us a real look into the past and why we have some issues going on in the present.
Ooh, Jenna, can I talk about one more book that I really loved? Okay, this is my favorite book I read this year. Like, not just of the books that came out this year. It's my favorite book I read this year.
And you probably read a lot of books, so that's saying a lot.
I read a few.
Yeah.
But this one's up there, and it's also, I think you would like it because it's also a young adult novel.
Ooh.
It's called How to Be Famous, and it's actually a sequel to another book I really love called How to Build a Girl, and it's by an author, a British author named Caitlin Moran. It's a coming-of-age story, just to back up and talk about How to Build a Girl for a minute, the first book. A coming-of-age story about a girl named Joanna Morrigan, who's a teenage music fan. So I'm a big music fan myself, so I really related to this character as a teenager. She grows up in rural England and starts writing music journalism in order to earn money for her dad, who's really sick. And it turns out she's really good at writing music journalism. In fact, she ends up moving to London to start covering shows. And that's where she meets a musician named John Kite. And Joanna winds up developing this huge crush on John, but he's simply too old for her. So that's where we leave off in How to Build a Girl without giving too much away. So in the sequel, which is called How to Be Famous, which came out this year, Joanna is 18 years old. She's living in London. She's still writing music reviews, and she stays really close friends with John, who's this musician that she loves. And he's become a blowout pop star, and he starts to get really grouchy because he's kind of annoyed with the amount of attention he's getting from teenage girl fans who all love his music, and he claims that he wants, some real fans, some grown-up fans.
Right.
And so this is why this book was my favorite book of the year. Joanna writes a letter to John explaining to him why teenage girls are the best fans you could ever possibly have. And she explains that teenage girls are so much more devoted as music fans than anybody else. And if a musician can change the life of a teenage girl, that's probably the best thing a musician could ever do for anybody with their careers. Anyways, the letter is really beautifully written. I feel like every book I've talked about on this episode, I say I've cried, but I really cried in this book. I mean,
You like to cry in books. That's
I
fine.
had to get up and get a tissue for this one. I couldn't just wipe it with the sleeve, but it was just so beautifully written. And the way John responds to Joanna's letter is even more beautiful. It completely, I don't know, it just changes his idea and definition of success for himself. And it's all because his friend Joanna wrote him this letter to talk about why teenage girls are awesome. We have both books, How to Build a Girl and the sequel that came out this year, How to Be Famous, in our catalog, and they're written by Caitlin Moran. And I do recommend reading the first book before the second. It's one of those, the ending will be much more satisfying that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man. It reminds me of a book that I read off of my sister's recommendation. It's probably one of her favorite books. It's called How to Kill a Rock Star.
Oh.
And it's very similar. She's a music journalist and falls in love with the rock star, basically.
Okay.
But it's really, really cool love story.
And it has the how-to in the title.
Yeah, I know.
Even.
That's why I was like, wait, is this the same book?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I'll have to read that
I'm
one.
going to have to recommend, she listens to the podcast. So Allison, read those books. And I'm also going to check them out as well.
Hi, Allison.
Hey, Allison. That's great. Yay, I'm glad you added those. So that's our episode, guys. We also want to know what you guys are reading and what you loved in 2018. So like I mentioned earlier, Hurley and I did a full video on our Facebook page. What's it called, Hurley?
It's called What You Reading? and
it's really good.
The jingle is really, you have not heard a jingle like
Hurley
this before.
and producer Brian outdid themselves on this jingle, guys.
You were in it too.
Okay. The high-pitched background is me, the main voice is Hurley, and then all the music is Brian. It was a group effort.
Yes.
It's really great. So if you watch it, or when you watch it rather, make sure you turn the music on, the sound on, because it's great. I don't remember why I brought that up, other than you should just watch it. Oh, yes, and comment on that video. That's why. I want you guys to comment on that video and tell us what you read in 2018 and what you loved, and if your book was on our top circulating list.
Yeah, definitely. We will have all of the books we discussed here in this episode linked in our blog at jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast. Check them out, put them on hold, read them, love them, tell us why you loved them, etc. Until the end of time, forever and ever and ever.
Until we start reading 2019 books.
Woo!
I
I'm
guess,
so excited.
Which is next. I know. I'm almost sad now because I have all these 2018 books that I want to read. But all the 2019 books are going to be right around the corner.
You're going to be reading a lot then.
So much to read, so little time.
I know. Man. I know. If only we had maybe 2 extra hours in the day.
Yeah.
Only 2.
And people are going to say, well, you guys work at the library. You should have plenty of time.
Nope.
No, we don't.
We're busy talking to you guys.
Obviously.
Duh. Take our survey too. We have a survey up on our podcast page, jackspubliclibrary.org/podcast. It's in the right-hand sidebar and it says take our survey! !
Yeah.
We want to hear what you like about the show, what you'd like us to do on the show, etc.
Yeah, and make sure you subscribe to this podcast if you're listening on iTunes so you get all the updates and know when the episodes come out. And also rate and review us.
Yes, we would love that very, very much. Follow us on social media at Jack's Library. And also, while you're on Facebook, liking our page, watch that video, What You Reading.
It's really great. And stay tuned for more episodes of our video series, What You Reading. It's great.
So fun. This podcast was produced by Brian Thomas, aka BT, aka Producer Brian.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Great job.
Great job.